The institutions that are winning attention right now are designing experiences. The same way a Broadway show designs the opening number that locks you in before you even see the plot.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Wilsey, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, we're taking a sharp left turn off the campus quad and straight into Times Square, because if Broadway can turn a cabinet meeting into a showstopper, there's no reason campus content should feel like a dull weekday matinee. Today, we're breaking down what higher ed can steal from the stage to build experiences students actually remember. And with me today is Tony Marie Pirelli, a creative strategist who thinks about higher ed the way Broadway thinks about storytelling. She blends brand, content, and PR to build experiences that spark community and move culture. And she's doing that work every day as a marketing and communication specialist at Fordham University. She was just named an AMA finalist for the 2025 Emerging Marketer in Higher Education Award, and her work pulls from some of the most iconic playbooks in entertainment, from Sesame Street to Times Square. Tony Marie, welcome to the Pulse. Now, this episode is dropping days after the Wicked movie drops, and I feel like we gotta talk about it. What are you most excited for in this movie, Tony Marie?
I am genuinely the most excited for the new songs. So yes. I've been a theater kid my whole life. I've lived in New York my whole life. Literally, my first grade graduation present was to go see Wicked on Broadway.
Stop.
Yeah. So I saw it again a few years ago after the pandemic reopening, just when I was trying to see a bunch of shows and get out. And so as truly a theater kid, nothing excites me more than new content and new songs. So I'm really excited for that. And I'm also excited to see how they kind of expand on the second act, because that was always my one complaint about Wicked, is that the second act felt very rushed. And that's not a bad thing to want more, but we're finally getting more, and I'm excited to see it happen.
Yes, I was so lucky to get to go to that Amazon Prime early screening. So Tony and I are recording, just for the record, a couple days before the movie actually releases, but I have seen it. And to your point about expanding the story in the second act, I think that was my favorite part. We got some Glinda backstory. We got to see Elphaba with animals in multiple scenes. It just really, being a fan of the book too, it just really helped for me fill out that second act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really not a bad thing that there was so much there, and it's good that people want more. That's what you want. You want people to want more out of your story and to want to get immersed in it. So it's so exciting to want to do more of that and see more of that.
I feel like that's a great transition. Now, fair warning, y'all, Tony Marie and I are both theater kids at heart. So God only knows where this podcast is going to go. I don't think I have been more excited for a recording in months. But here we are. Let's talk about the situation. Musical storytelling is having a cultural moment again, especially with Wicked's movie release, nudging Broadway back into the spotlight. And I think we're all feeling a little swankified as audiences remember what it feels like to be pulled into a world that's built on character and tension and craft. Recently, the Associated Press reported that theater is finally cracking the Gen Z code by doing what higher ed still resists: telling stories that sound like the people they're trying to reach. Broadway is shifting its center of gravity with new creative teams and cultural references, pulling new audiences in with younger fans into this world that they once thought wasn't for them. Now, Tony Marie and I agree, higher ed is facing a similar problem. Students aren't benchmarking institutions against peer and aspirant sets. They're benchmarking your school against everything that they see online today. They expect narrative and clarity. They expect to feel something. And the institutions that are winning attention right now are designing experiences. The same way a Broadway show designs the opening number that locks you in before you even see the plot. That's at the heart of Toni Marie's work. She's building edutainment on purpose. Things like TikToks and Duolingo style career content and career cello. We're going to get into all of that. Toni Marie is turning what was once pretty dry topics into more creative and community driven moments that students actually want to engage with. So Toni Marie, before we even get into Broadway or strategy, I want to ground this in something that's very human, because the kind of creative work you do is not the default in higher ed. It takes a point of view. It takes conviction. It takes some stamina. So I'm curious, why does creative work in higher ed matter to you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big learner. Like, I was the kid for second grade that was going outside and reading books on the playground because I love to read, I love to learn. My parents instilled in me very early on a sense of curiosity, and I feel like I've just taken that and run with it. And then to your point, higher ed content has been traditionally seen as like very dry and very formal, that like, you know, there's this almost gatekeeper sense of mentality that this is advanced research and this is ultra academic, when that's simply not the case. I mean, we're seeing schools even put out classes about like Taylor Swift and Beyonce, that, you know, this isn't just high level academic research on topics that the average person couldn't even begin to understand, because academic research always goes back to benefit culture at large, society at large. It always connects to something else. And for a little bit more background, I'm an ex-ballet dancer. So I spent the first 18 years of my life immersed in the ballet world. And if we want to talk about a culture that is very resistant to change, that is ballet. So for me, coming into higher ed, I was very much used to this sense of traditionalism, to doing things the way they've always been done, but also understanding that that's not how society works anymore, that the technology and platforms that we have are changing literally by the day, and it's very overwhelming and it's a lot. But all of this new tech is new opportunity. It's giving people different ways of interacting with us. So how do you leverage that new opportunity to better reach your audiences, or in the case of a lot of my work, reach audiences that might not have considered you in the first place because you weren't previously accessible to them?
I did not know you were a ballerina. That's incredible. Yes. Oh my God. Where did you study?
Yeah, so I studied mostly at a small regional school in my area because I wanted to do school too. I considered doing the full-time dance thing, but I was like, but dance is only so long and I don't want to sacrifice my education. But I ended up doing summer intensives at Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet, American Theater, the works.
That's amazing. Now, I think you're right to draw some parallels, though, to the rigidity and the way things have always been done. And I think, you know, once you really start to care deeply about the work that you're doing, you do start to see some of these cracks within higher ed. And I think that students, you know, they're not rejecting higher education, but in some ways they do reject the way that we talk about it, or at the very least in this attention economy, it's not getting their attention. So have you seen stories out there that you feel like are just no longer working for students today?
Yeah, and some of it I will say is an oversaturation of content, because there's a lot of institutions that once one person does something really, really well, everybody else does it. And when I mean everybody else, I mean everybody else. And it's not just on campus, it's every campus across the country. And I feel like things like very basic alumni spotlight interviews, we get it at this point. Your alumni do really, really great things, but just telling us about it isn't really enough, because your institution alone has pumped out 300 of them, and at a certain point it gets repetitive of yourself. And I think even just like very, very standard, like, look how beautiful our campus is content, like things that don't define your brand and your institutional culture. People want to know who you are. They want to know what you stand for. They want to know what makes you unique and different. That's how people decide where they want to go to school. Because if every school was the same, there would be no choice. There would be no college tours. There wouldn't be any of this. And even for on-campus departments, because I work in the Career Center right now, every school has a different way of setting up their departments. Some people are used to that, some people aren't, especially if they have older siblings and their school does something differently. People also don't understand what the difference between different departments is if they've never been exposed to it. So how do you distinguish yourself and say, this is who I am, this is what I can do for you, here's how I can help you, and here's what you need to do to come back and help yourself?
So you're based in New York City. I happen to know a fun fact that you've been to all 41 Broadway theaters. And so let's talk Broadway for a minute, because the theater district is a masterclass in emotional design and audience development, storytelling discipline. It is entertainment, but it can also be educational. So when you look at Broadway, like what and how it constructs a story, are there any lessons that you've pulled from that into your work?
Yeah, 100%. I am very much the kind of person that believes that inspiration needs to be pulled from everywhere because that's how your audience is engaging with it. So to me, I think the thing that is most beautiful about Broadway, and I'm going to say the greater New York theater scene because I believe Off-Broadway is doing some really, really incredible work right now, and we need to highlight that. But there are 41 different theaters. All 41 theaters are different. They're different sizes. They're different shapes. Some have 3 tiers. Some have 2 tiers. Some are huge stages. Some are very small, intimate audiences. And if everything goes as it should, there should be 41 different shows designed at different audiences. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about talking, at least in the theater world, is that not every show is for every person, but there is a show for every person out there. And some of it depends on your kind of interest in theater. Traditionally, and I say traditionally because this is starting to change a little bit and it's very exciting, but plays were really reserved for like the ultra theater people, like the people who are so into theater and like dramaturgy and like all this like very intense stuff. And so the casual audience wasn't going to see plays. That's changing so much right now with things like Oh Mary, John Proctor is the villain recently. But one of the case studies I find really interesting is Stranger Things, The First Shadow. Most people wouldn't think to go see a play as their first Broadway show, but how many people are going to see the Stranger Things play as their first Broadway show, realizing that they love plays and then going into deeper plays like, an Oedipus revival, even an Oh Mary, because Oh Mary can seem a little, it's a little nebulous if you're not into the theater scene, but it's really, really great work. But at the same time, that also exists and it's paralleled in the musical sphere. How many people start with a Disney musical first because they're not really sure where to start and they know The Lion King, they know Aladdin? People aren't going to start going to Dead Outlaw. I can assure you, nobody's first Broadway musical. And that is not a bad thing at all. I loved Dead Outlaw. I thought it was an incredible musical, but it's really, really hard to sell a musical about, Elmer McCurdy's life and death and his adventures as a corpse to someone who's never seen a musical before. Because you're like, that makes no sense. Why would anyone sing about that? So some of it is a little bit of customer journey, consumer journey. Where do they start? How do they get really invested into this sphere? And how do they keep going throughout it? And I think that's the one thing that higher ed has a fairly decent handle on, is that success doesn't always look like people starting an undergrad degree and going to a doctorate degree. There's very different journeys people can take in their degree path. And, at least at Fordham in the Career Center, one of our benchmarks for success of students is where they go on to graduate school if they go on to graduate school. Success isn't just, I'm going to stay here at Fordham and go to Fordham. It could be, I'm going to any number of graduate schools. And that's something that's very similar in theater, because if you have a revival that's 8 weeks long and it's a very short stint, people probably aren't going to see it 20 times because there's not 20 times to see it in 8 weeks. But if they keep going to other shows, that's a success for the industry.
So all of this thinking and inspiration just shows up all over the work that you're doing at Fordham's Career Center. And you're taking topics that have felt dusty and procedural and, things like resume building and interview prep, right? And you're truly giving them a whole creative life and no one recognized that more perhaps than your recent, being a recent finalist for AMA's Emerging Marketer of the Year, right? What a great accolade to confirm all of this incredible work you're doing. So let's dig into that, because I want us to talk about some of these really cool projects like Careercella, Please, 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 Learn Your Professional Lingo. Like, pick one of them to start and just walk us through the idea, the problem you were solving, and what it unlocked that maybe a traditional workshop couldn't.
Yeah, so I think Careercella is probably the best example out of that bunch. So the start of every semester here at Fordham, we do a kickoff event, and it's mostly targeted at first-year students to let them know that, like, hey, we're here to help you no matter what stage of your career journey that you're at. It could be writing a resume, it could be figuring out how to negotiate an offer, or one of the things that we see most often is, I have no clue what I want to do with my life. I have no clue what I want to major in. How can you help me figure it out, or at least narrow down my options? So it's not necessarily selling a service or teaching, how to write a resume, how to write a cover letter, but really introducing ourselves as a resource and positioning ourselves as more than just a resume editor, because that's a big misconception with a lot of students. And we always do it the first week of the semester, which is really great because that's when students are most excited to come back. They're so excited to be here. They've had all summer off. It's also the most challenging because so many other things are going on the first week. Usually with scheduling, we're competing with the club fair. We have move-in that just happened. People are, especially with the first years, they're on campus for the first time. They might not know where their classes are. So how do you get them to come to an event that is supposed to be fun, casual, lighthearted, and very introductory in nature when they don't even know where the event is being held? So it's a lot of different moving pieces with that. We also always have employers come in, so employers can start to introduce themselves to students, because career fairs are very intimidating. So one of the things we figured out is if we can take the intimidation out of it by kind of easing them into speaking with employers, it makes students a lot more confident early on, and it also helps their networking. So it's been a lot of tweaks over the years to kind of get to the model event that we want. But typically our attendance would be in like the 200s, maybe the 300s, which is great. But when you have classes of like 2,000 students, you want to reach more. So I'm sitting here and I'm trying to figure out, what can we do that kind of builds on known feelings? Like, we want to build on known associations because you don't have the time to really communicate what this is. This isn't like a career fair where you can do like a really drawn out campaign. You can't really do anything before the semester because kids aren't here or they're moving in and there's too many distractions. And by the time they're here, you have less than a week. So how do you do that? So I went through and I ran through a bunch of ideas of like, what's kind of like fun and festival like, because it's a lot of tables, it's a lot of different stations, and it's kind of like going to a trade show. But first year students aren't going to want to go to a trade show. Like, that's not fun to them yet. So what else is kind of like that? And I'm like, okay, well, there's like, like street fair festival things, but that's not really compelling. Festival. And I just kind of kept going with that. And I'm like, what if we made it like music festival themed? We don't have like a huge budget. It can't be anything crazy, but we do have WFUV on campus, and we can hire a student DJ to DJ the event. That'll get upperclassmen in because they'll want to support their friends and support WFUV. So that's really awesome. And then with the rest of it, it's just a matter of branding. So let's go with that. And it ended up working out really, really well for us. It was really cute. We had like all access badges for everybody that was working there, that it made it really easy for the students to figure out who we were. People really responded to it well. And one of the things that was different is they came and they hung out for a while, and not just for the food and the ice cream truck that our employer sponsored. They were really invested. And our event attendance was almost 600 that year. So it was like noticeably different. And then we're still working through the data because we want to map it out over the full 4-year period. But between that event and a separate targeted first-year email campaign, we have noticed that students of that class year are engaging more with us. And it's simply because we took the time to really reach out and say, okay, hey, here's how we can help you. Here's what we can do for you. And we understand you. We get your language. You can trust us.
That's really cool. I mean, was there like a Braid and Space Fun station?
I wish. We had like a lemonade station, I think. This was over a year ago, so my memory is blanking at this point. But we had like a bunch of different craft activities and things like that they could actually like do that weren't even career related. But yeah, really tried to make it as music festival-y as possible.
Well, it's so much fun. Fringe and glitter for everybody, right?
Exactly.
So I know this wasn't, like your first big swing. Like when you were previously at Manhattanville, you were treating TikTok like a literal stage, which I think, in hindsight sounds pretty obvious, but I think at the time, a lot of institutions were not really thinking through any sort of strategy when it came to TikTok. So talk me through that.
Yeah. So when I was at Manhattanville, I started as a student worker and then I was recruited into my full-time role. And when I was a student worker, they wanted to start a TikTok page, but they really had no clue how to do it. We were a very small team, only about 4 or 5 people full-time. And it was like, okay, well, we need to do TikTok. Students are on it, but like nobody really knows how to do TikTok here. We're all adults. Like there was a gap. So I was hired as a student photographer originally, and then I was like, well, I can help with TikTok a little bit. Like, I'm not an expert yet, but like, I want to learn and I'm happy to help. So I ended up developing a lot of the initial strategy on it. But then when I converted into my full-time role, one of my other responsibilities was to work with our faculty experts. So some of that was more like PR, media relations oriented. But we had this one professor that had done a lecture called TikToks, kind of as a pun on TikToks. And I was like, we need to move this to TikTok. And everyone on my team agreed. And so from there, they were like, okay, like you figure it out with the professor. Like you do we trust you. So I met with him and he's like a super cool, chill guy, truly an expert in his field, but very down to earth and knows how to speak approachably and knows how to make his language not scientific. So that was a huge non-obstacle to deal with. So with that, I essentially talked to him and I'm like, how many ideas do you have? Like, what are we working with here? Do you want to talk about one thing, a couple different things? We ended up turning it into a 6-part mini series where in each video he was like, hi, I'm Dr. Pappas and I'm back with another TikTok on TikTok. And then every little video answered a question. So it was like, what do you do if a tick gets into your house? What do you do if a tick gets on my clothing? Like really, really basic things that aren't bio student level, just anybody level. And it was really cool. He actually has a tick colony in his lab and he got to take the ticks out and we put them under microscopes and we let him walk around the counter. And, it was a lot of very, very close-up angles that I never thought I'd have to get in my career. But it was really, really cool. And the video series as a whole ended up getting over 60,000 views. Wow. And people kept coming with more questions because he positioned himself as someone that they could trust, that was approachable, and obviously an expert in his field. And I will say a lot of the credit there comes from just his general charisma in presenting. He was a very well-spoken professor. But that kind of model could be applied to so many different people. And even professors that aren't as willing or as comfortable on camera can get coached into that level of support. I was very hands-off with Dr. Pappas and, great for him. But, that's what we are as communications professionals. We translate things. So even if you have a researcher who's like, I don't know how to simplify this, okay, let's talk it out. Let's work it out. Let's write down a script. Let's practice it a couple times.
So let's talk about edutainment for a moment, because I've just been really marinating on this idea for the last 6 to 9 months. And I love that you have influences that come from these decades long edutainment giants, things like Sesame Street and the Weather Channel. Like these are storytellers who are educating without always feeling like education. But sometimes I just think higher ed still kind of misunderstands edutainment as a strategy. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so a lot of my work is rooted in edutainment, and I was very edutainment first, even coming into my current role at Fordham. I was absolutely the kid that watched Sesame Street and PBS Kids all the time because I enjoyed doing something that was stimulating for myself. And I think that is a very big conversation nowadays, at least in children's media, which is a whole other rabbit hole that we could go into. But even adults love stimulating media. My dad is a huge Weather Channel history person. How many people watch documentaries, even true crime documentaries? It's still educational. You're still learning something. But people don't want to be lectured to. They don't want to be just rattled off a bunch of facts and expected to memorize it. that's where the narrative and the characters and good production values come in to help, is really figuring out how can we take this really awesome information that people care about and package it in a way that feels lighter and easier to absorb. So, sometimes that's fun colors. Sometimes it's, using characters or kind of a fake storyline to kind of connect it together. Sometimes it's someone with a lot of stage presence and a lot of charisma. There's so many different ways to do it, but it's recognizing the inherent value in what you have to deliver. And I don't think that people who misunderstand edutainment undervalue their information. I just don't think that they see the broadest value in it. That, I keep going back to researchers because I see so much opportunity there. People care so much about research and they love seeing new things come out and new solutions. And communications and research are very similar in that respect, that they're solving problems. And, these are problems that affect people's daily lives. They want to see new updates coming out about it. But how can we communicate this in a way that doesn't take a master's degree to understand? Because not everyone has a master's degree in every subject. So how can you just really communicate with the audience that wants to know this information, but maybe otherwise hasn't had access to it?
And make them care, but do that by speaking in their language. And
yes.
You actually frame this in our prep, giving them value that they're not even seeking.
Yes, there's so much out there, and it's usually information overload 24/7, but people can't care about things that they don't know about. And I'm a very big proponent of you don't know what you don't know. So if you can open someone's eyes just a little bit, there's a good chance they'll care about it. And sometimes you kind of have to deliver that as here's the main dish of something you already know, and are interested in, but we're going to sneak in this little side dish of something new here and see how you respond to it. Oh, you like that? Okay, there's more where that came from.
That's such an interesting look into your creative process, because it's you have to create some serendipity on purpose here. Is there any formulas that people, or frameworks that people can follow to do this better or more intentionally?
I think it's really understanding your customer journey, customer touch points, and audience psychology. So if you understand how people are interacting with your content, you can meet them where you're at and slowly start introducing in new things, but you can do it in a way that they'll like. So if you know that your audience is really, really receptive to a certain style of video, try that first. See how that goes. Work with what you know and start kind of building in what you don't and seeing. It's a little bit like an experiment sometimes, because sometimes even the things that work really, really well don't always work out. And that is okay. Things change. It's very much rooted in how does your audience want to receive the information you're presenting? And I think one of the social strategies I've been seeing, and I think social is a really great platform for a lot of this work, is people uploading the same video in multiple formats with different text styles. And it's the exact same content. There's very few differences, but maybe the editing style is a little different. Maybe the title is a little different. Maybe it's a longer video. Maybe it's a shorter video. Testing with formatting, because, okay, I know that there's value here, but if this one video doesn't pick up, that doesn't mean that the content needs to go away forever.
As the curtain falls on this episode, if Higher Ed was a Broadway show, what note do you think the director would give us on opening night, and what would you want the next act to look like?
I'm going to tap into some of my former dance and theater teachers here a little bit. And I'm also going to reference a very popular superhero movie. With great power comes great responsibility. People are coming to you expecting to have their lives changed, and you have the power to do it. There is limitless talent in this room. There's limitless potential in this room. But you cannot give to the audience what you do not have yourself. So really take the time to understand what you need and how you can take care of yourself. This isn't a 1 week limited run. This is a very, very long-term open run, and you need to make sure that's sustainable for you and for all of your castmates. So how can you support each other better to lift each other up and then bring the audience with you on that ride?
Toni Marie, this was a gift. I mean, I just love when someone brings strategy and soul into the work. And it's just clear from the examples you gave us and just the passion that you can hear in your voice that you're doing that on every project you touch. Thank you for taking us backstage in your creative process. Where can listeners find you if they want to nerd out over Broadway or learn more about how you're bringing those inspirations into the creative process?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. It is just my name, Toni Marie Pirelli, and I'm also in the process and very soon to launch my new portfolio site where I'll have much deeper dives into a lot of my favorite projects and my work. That'll also be linked on my LinkedIn, and it is also just my name, so ToniMariePirelli.com.
Perfect. Well, that's it for this episode of Higher Ed Pulse. If you enjoyed it, make sure you run to Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening, and give us a little rating and review. That's how we continue to help this podcast grow. Thank you in advance. And folks, we will catch you next time. Now, I will let you know next week's episode's a special one, so you will not want to miss it. That's all I'm going to say. All right, friends. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.